Do you think that there could be another Madoff out there right now?
Hopefully they're not as big. Certainly there are Madoffs out there. With the economy the way it is, though, you'd have to think that the tide is running out. New investors aren't rushing in, and so these things are going to collapse on their own.
In the Madoff scandal, there were fund managers who were simply taking your money and handing it over to him and taking a cut of it themselves, and that was the extent of the financial arrangement.
Madoff was brilliant in one respect. He paid well over 90% of the fees to those fund-to-funds and the feeder funds, people that are feeding in new victims into the scheme. And that was his mastery. He took the smallest piece for himself, so they asked no questions. And they assumed that he was doing something illegal called front-running, which would have put him in prison. But they thought the returns were real, even though they were generated illegally. They thought to be able to keep them. So they never asked any of those questions because they didn't want to hear the answer.
Are more of those people going to go to jail? More of those people should go to jail?
More should. Will more go to jail? The government has to prove criminal intent. That may be a big leap. You have to get into the courtroom with a high burden of proof. I don't know. We'll find out. I hope so.
In my mind, there are two things. Madoff happened in the middle of this incredible financial crisis. People could understand Madoff. They could understand a guy who stole money for himself, for pleasure, for whatever reason he was a predator. The financial debacle with all of those over-the-counter derivatives, sometimes people couldn't understand exactly what that was all about. And there are so many different people to blame. But they really do go together when you talk about fixing our financial system, don't they?
There's not much difference between what happened on the collapse on Wall Street and the collapse of Bernie Madoff. Madoff, you can claim as an individual, but the firms, everybody's pointing this way, the corporate responsibility. No one's bearing the blame. Everybody's saying they were stupid. And that's just a cop-out. They weren't stupid. They were greedy.
Where do we go from here in terms of regulating the complexity of financial products and the like? I mean, Madoff's, at the very end, all of his statements said, T-bills or bonds or something, and everyone knew they weren't in that. Before that, people didn't care because he's in something. He's a complicated hedge fund. He's in a lot of interesting things.
I think we need to change the legal definition of what a fiduciary is responsible for and what the prudent man rule is. If you can't take apart an instrument and model it yourself, you shouldn't be allowed to invest in it and still qualify as either a fiduciary or qualify under the prudent man rule.
Mm-hmm. What about the regulators who were, I guess, asleep at the switch, and have admitted, the SEC has admitted that they missed this? Should there be criminal charges against regulators whose job it was to protect investors?
Going forward, I think you need to have a Sarbanes-Oxley for government. If government agency heads don't do their jobs and enforce the law, yes, you should put the agency heads in jail. You can't go back and do revisionist history. There's no laws in the books that allow you to put staff that missed this in jail. It's not a crime to be stupid.
Do you think people are still stupid in these regulatory agencies?
Beyond stupid, and they all kept their jobs. Not one person has been fired at any regulatory agency, and they failed this nation greatly. They stole their paychecks.